Another capital gains tax solutions podcast, also streamed on expert CRE secrets podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated cryptocurrency businesses, real estate, defer capital gains tax. You can create and preserve more wealth, or help your clients, friends, and family do the same. For those who don't know me, my name is Brett Swartz, and I'm the host today of the podcast. And each and every episode, we're bringing on some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and business minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the great state of New York, and he is focused like a laser on helping high net worth individuals reduce their tax and gain financial clarity. Their team of elite real estate CPAs guide high net worth individuals with proactive tax planning and outsourced accounting services. They've been seen on Bigger Pockets. They've been on Inc. 5000 list. And really what I love about what they do is they're focused like a laser on the real estate professional community, whether that be someone who's running a fund, someone who's doing syndications, or just a high net worth individual who's looking for practical real estate investor tips to reduce taxes, not just the general tips. And so they're highly specialized, and this is going to be an amazing interview. Please welcome to the show with me, Thomas Castelli. Hey, Thomas, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here today.
Absolutely. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of started off in the accounting world. Everybody was like, go to college. So I went to college, got a degree in accounting. And kind of when I was in college, I started to realize, in order to build wealth and live the lifestyle I really wanted to live, I'm going to have to do more than just have an accounting career. So I started picking up books, started reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And, from there, the rabbit hole goes pretty deep. And what I've noticed is that real estate was in the portfolio of many, many wealthy people for tax purposes as well as other reasons. So I started going to events, started networking, and eventually I met this group who was doing a 3-day weekend on real estate syndication. So I went to their 3-day weekend, learned everything about the syndication business, and fell in love with that model. Started going to their monthly events, eventually met someone who would be a mentor to me, and invested with them as a limited partner. And then eventually they said, hey, look, if you ever find a deal, we will syndicate the deal with you. So I went and found the deal, and we syndicated that. That since went full cycle. That was an 82-unit apartment complex in Jacksonville, Florida. And now I'm investing as a limited partner so I could focus on my career in accounting. And I'll come back to active real estate at some point later on. It is in the plans, but right now I'm focused on as a limited partner.
Amazing, Thomas. Absolutely love that. And if you want to learn more about Thomas, you can go to therealestatecpa.com, therealestatecpa.com. Not only is Thomas a CPA, but he's also a certified financial planner. Before we dive into the topic at hand, which is becoming a real estate focused CPA, and then what that can do for you as the real estate investor or entrepreneur who is struggling with taxes of all sorts. Thomas, I want to take one other step back. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. I'm curious, who is Thomas when you're growing up? What do you feel like the one or two gifts that you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
Yeah, I've always been, I guess you could say, a go-getter or very driven. So I've always been want to do things a little differently. So like when I was growing up, I'd always be going out trying to make money for myself, whether it was doing landscaping or washing cars or computer repair, so on and so forth. So that ability has helped me be able to find solutions to problems that people have, and that's applied pretty well in my career as a tax advisor, because people always have there's patterns to people's problems, but sometimes people's problems are unique when you put it all together, and finding solutions to that rather than just giving the same old advice has cookie cutter advice, if you will, has served me well in that capacity. So I'd say that being driven and being willing to find solutions to problems has really been a key driver of my career and my life so far.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah. Thinking it differently, adding value, being entrepreneurial, being hungry, and going out and seeing those challenges, and then having an entrepreneur driven spirit to solve those problems and help people. Is that a fair summary?
Yep, I'd say so.
Awesome. So let's dive right into the topic at hand, which is becoming a real estate focused CPA. So Thomas, what would you say is the number one secret to becoming a real estate focused CPA?
Yeah. So if you want to become a real estate focused CPA, you definitely want to work with real estate investors. That's probably the best way, because there's a lot of hands-on learning. And as you kind of come into the problems that your clients are facing, you're going to be forced to do the research. You're going to be forced to find the solutions to their problems. Now, having said that, reading is a big one as well. So for me, when I first started kind of my journey of advising, I went and just found books on the topic of real estate tax. The NOLO series has been phenomenal. A great way to educate yourself on what strategies are available to you as an investor. But then also diving into tax court cases, into the actual tax law itself has been a tremendous help. So I guess to summarize that, you want to work with real estate clients because they're going to present you with problems, and through solving those problems, you're going to gain a lot of expertise. And secondly, reading the available research and books and blogs and articles written by professionals out there who are in the real estate space will also help you kind of get a good idea of what's available and how you can help your clients.
Absolutely. I think of it like sometimes people ask about what I do and how we figured it out. It's like, well, I spent the 10,000 hours with the brain surgeon who was helping all the people do all the things and watching all the surgeries basically, and all the deals and different nuances and different angles. And essentially it's full immersion. It's like, how do you learn how to swim? Well, you need to get in the water and start swimming, right? And so it sounds like the focus on that niche client, which is the real estate investors, spending a ton of time with them, solving the problems, and that helps you to see the patterns, right? And create opportunities for you probably to think in a way that most people wouldn't have, because you've been solving so many of those problems, and then you probably do those slight adjustments. Talk about how you've evolved with your problem and your analytical skills over time as you spent so much time with real estate investors that most CPAs just wouldn't do because they're, let's face it, more of a generalist.
Yeah, right. So a generalist will typically go very surface level. So they'll maybe read the IRS guidance or publications, and they'll go along like the surface. As I kind of moved along in my career as a tax advisor for real estate investors, you start to see there's a lot of nuanced problems that you have to find solutions for, find answers to. And just looking at the plain old tax code or looking at the guidance from the IRS isn't always going to paint the whole picture. So diving into tax court cases has really been huge, because where there's a lack of guidance from the regulations or from the IRS or the tax code itself, you can often find people who went to tax court and had a similar problem, maybe not the same exact problem, but similar. And it's the tax court has determined the answer, has already figured that out, and it has like drawn a conclusion to it. Has a position on it rather. And going into tax court cases and finding the solutions for people who have similar fact patterns has been huge. I'd say that's probably a primary differentiator. And also, one of the things that's been interesting is there's this one strategy for short-term rental investors where I believe that the tax court misinterpreted the regulations. And we have, or the tax court's opinion rather, okay, this is the best way to put it, was dated, and the regulations has since been updated. And rather than taking the tax court's opinion at face value, if you dive back into the updated regulations, you see that might no longer be the case. So we've written an article on that and published that in a professional publication. So going that extra mile and diving deep into tax court cases, and also once you have that intimate understanding, like you said, that 10,000 hours or the 10,000 reps, you start to see things differently. You start to see where the nuances are and start to see where there might be flaws in some arguments. So if that kind of makes sense, it's kind of where I'm at, I guess you could say.
I think it absolutely does. And by the way, you can learn more about Thomas Castelli by going to therealestatecpa.com. So Thomas, what I found is that you can't blame the generalists, because it's like the family practitioner who's done the blood work, who's done the flu shot, and has been the family practitioner for many, many years in a general sense. And you need that, right?
Yeah.
But when it becomes the more nuanced challenges, they're not the one to do the, I played basketball in college, so the ACL surgery, right? They're not the ones to do, you might need a hip replacement if you get older, right? Or knee replacement. I probably will when I get older. But the idea that, I like the way you put that, the opinions versus the regulations, they could be out of date, right? And there's a lot of nuance. It's not a cookie cutter, most things, and some things in the tax law are, right? They have like certain things for IRAs and 401ks and 1031s at 45, 180, like kind replacement. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's very there, but there's things that are open to interpretation, right?
Sure.
And that's part of why there's so many, I think, pages in the tax code. And so having that practitioner, that professional who can execute and look at those nuances, the way that my business partner, who's a CPA tax attorney, puts it, it's like the ability to defend and present to the IRS your case.
Right.
And most people, they just don't have those reps. And so they get, concerned about things that maybe are a little bit outside of the general box that they're looking at. So I'm curious, what is the best way that you've helped, clients overcome, hey, it's too good to be true for Thomas, whatever that you might be presenting, whether that's, cost seg is pretty much, it's foregone conclusion, right? But I imagine you have certain things, strategies that you're using that are maybe a little bit outside the box, but you're looking for ways to help people overcome that. And they're looking at their general CPA, but maybe give us a scenario of that and how you help people overcome that.
Yeah, right. So 100%. So it's been education and a combination of education and coaching. So what I mean by education, it's showing the citations for the regulations, the tax code, and the tax court cases that support this position. So that they understand, hey, look, while yes, your general CPA may not have went down this rabbit hole far enough to find all of this stuff, it does exist, and here's all the support for it. So usually once the clients see all the support for a position, they usually start to see like, okay, great, my general CPA just hasn't went deep enough into the rabbit hole to figure this out, and they usually get comfortable with it from there. So, and then also just like when I say from a coaching perspective, it's putting this information, is setting us like presenting this information in a way that makes sense, and then kind of talking through their objections, if you will, which are mostly concerns about risk for the most part, or how it might apply to their situation. So the combination of those two things has gone a long way. And I can't, the citations and having that support ready can't be understated there.
Okay, I like that. So it sounds like the best way to overcome the false belief it's too good to be true if the generalist CPA is not agreeing or is concerned about it is to show the exact citations that support the position that you're taking, number one. And number two, that opens up the idea that, oh, it does exist. Maybe my CPA generalist hasn't gone deep enough. We've also found too, is when you invite the CPA in, and you actually have them along the ride for the journey of the due diligence rather than the back seat or the car that's trailing behind. Because sometimes, our clients, I encourage them, like, go pay the CPA to do the due diligence, right? Number one. But B, don't race ahead of them and then have them try to make a decision within 30 days because your deal is closing. What we do is for the capital gains tax solutions, it ends up being multi-million-dollar exits, big tax bills, big opportunities, which we'll talk about here in a minute, how you're helping clients solve all that. But it's that window of how you invite them in. But also, I want to touch on this part of it, Thomas. It's that emotional connection, right? Where, hey, I have had someone help the family for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They've helped them go from 0 to 5 million, 10 million, or 100 million, or whatever it is. They've been that CPA. And so sometimes they're putting the, like, I need you to say yes before I say yes to Thomas and his team, right?
Yeah. And
it's an unfair position because the CPA really has no upside, the generalist, in the sense that if he says yes to something that he hasn't ever done before, and he's kind of concerned about, and it does work, well, then great. Thomas is probably still the hero. But if he says no to it and he says yes to it and it doesn't work, well, now he's kind of the guy who's on the hook. So talk about that relation of that emotional transfer from one person who tends to be the person who's always helped them to, let's say, hey, how do we make this a team effort and not make it one or the other, but both of us together?
Right. Yeah. So that's a great question. So there's kind of two angles. Sometimes, so I'll take the first angle first, the one where sometimes it's like when you're running a business, right? Maybe a certain staff member, team member has been able to get you so far, but now the business requires someone else with a deeper or more complex skill set to take the business to the next level or to bring it to where it needs to go today. So if you take the view of you want to put your business first, then sometimes there's going to be team members that include people who are not necessarily employees of yours. It's time to move on from those people because even though you might have a history, everything's went great. If you continue working with this individual or this team, what have you, you're holding yourself back. You're holding your business back from going to where it needs to go. So there's one angle, right? There's an emotional connection. They've helped you, but at some point you got to say, this is a business decision. We can leave on good terms, and sometimes it's better just to find someone who's better suited for your business at that time. So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is like trying to get the generalist CPA on board. It really comes down to the generalist CPA's willingness to go deeper and to open themselves up to learning more. Not all general CPAs want to do that. Some general CPAs, in my experience, just want to stick to their box. They know what they're good at and they want to continue doing that. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that. And that might be a situation where you want to move on. Other CPAs will be are open to education. So when you do provide them citations, the tax court cases, the regulations, so on and so forth, they can get comfortable with it. Having said that, they have businesses to run as well. So if, to your point, you don't want to just spring this on them like, oh, I need to close this deal in the next 30 days, because they might not have time to go and dig into that. If you're proactive and you have a plan, then you should see this coming. You'll know this is coming. You'll be able to give them the proper time to educate themselves. If that's the route that you want to go and they're open to that type of arrangement. So that's kind of the way I've seen it work. You have to know where you're going, and you have to have a plan, and you have to make sure that you can get your team in place. And that includes external people like CPAs.
Oh my gosh, you said that so well. I feel like that's been the one thing that has been the most challenging, Thomas, to really get and understand of how to help win the CPA. And I'm hearing you're saying, take the view of a business perspective, take them outside of it. First of all, like, hey, you're exiting or you're doing the strategy. Let's back up. Let's analogy that you're growing your business from 0 to 10 million or 10 to 100 million. The same people that help you get to 0 to 10 million, right? You made business decisions along the way to change the team members or change the team that services you or whatever it is. Take that same perspective now with your own tax, right? And it may mean getting a new team, but before we go there, let's see if the coach is coachable, or let's see if the CPA is coachable, right? Let's see if they're humble and open and willing to learn and to dig in and to dive in, or are they so busy or so stuck in their practice that they're not, right? And then in that scenario, well, it may be that you've outgrown them, right? And they're not open to or willing to serve the level that you need to serve, rather than just paying the tax. Very well said. I love that. And I think it comes back to the book. I think Patrick Lencioni, Humble, Hungry, and Smart, right? Is the CPA or generalist humble, coachable, willing to learn, right? Are they actually hungry? Like, are they, do they have enough margin and actually hungry to learn something new and be a part of this? And the smart piece is emotional intelligence, just connecting with people, but also, again, pay the man, right? I always say, or pay the woman, right? Pay the person, right? Like, say, hey, I'm going to pay you, $300 an hour to dive into this with me. If indeed you want their blessing on the thing, pay them and give them time to do all that. Anything else to add to that, or is that a fair summary?
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair summary. I just want to reiterate the paying them portion of it, because, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a CPA, but most CPAs operate on, they're getting paid to file your tax returns. And then like when they're doing work outside of that scope, they need to be compensated in some way. So that's why a lot of CPAs don't give advice or give proactive tax strategy and planning on these things, is because they're not compensated to do so. So if they're giving you free advice effectively, or they're researching something for you for free, then that's taking time and energy away from preparing tax returns or working on clients who are paying them. So just know that your CPA's time is valuable, and if you want them to explore and dig into this stuff for you, sometimes you're going to have to compensate them in order for them to do so. So
absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So let's dive now into the topic that we kind of focus on, which is capital gains, tax, right? So Thomas, what would you say is the biggest frustration when it comes to the 1031 exchange? and or just capital gains tax solutions for crypto or business exits or primary home or stock, public or private stock. What have you seen is the biggest frustration with that? And then how are you helping your clients, either defer the capital gains taxes, mitigate capital gains taxes, eliminate estate taxes? What's some of your best strategies, Thomas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest frustrations with, like, say, the 1031 exchange is that it's only available to real estate investors. So you can only really use it for real estate at this point. The tax laws have changed. And now, like I said, it's only available to real estate investors. So that's one frustration. Then you have very strict timelines. You have to identify typically up to 3 properties. We all know there's some nuances there within a 45-day period. And if you don't do that, then the 1031 exchange is going to fail. Likewise, if you fail to close on one or more of those properties within the 180-day window, the strict timelines that you have, it can the 1031 exchange will fail, and you'll kind of be forced to pay the capital gains tax unless you have another option, a second plan B, right? And then from there, with that could, because that tight timeline, you could be forced in some cases to make suboptimal investment decisions, or sometimes point blank bad investment decisions. So that's kind of one of the issues with 1031s. Now, for most other assets, not all, but most other assets, there's not always great strategies to defer capital gains taxes. You have the installment sale when you're selling a business, but when you're selling stocks, for example, if they're not in a retirement account, really the main way to be able to do that, traditionally at least, is to be able to use tax loss harvesting, which is using capital losses to offset the gains. So that's kind of some of the frustrations there. Now, how we've been able to help some people navigate these waters, and I'll go through the real estate side first, is the 1031 exchange is always there. It's always an option. Then we have what's been coined, or what's become known as, rather, the lazy 1031 exchange, or 1031 exchange light, some people will call it, even though it has nothing to do with the 1031 exchange. And that's where you buy another property in the same year that you sell a property, and you use the law. You basically run a cost segregation study on it to accelerate the depreciation, use bonus depreciation to generate losses that can help offset that capital gain on the sale of the original property. Now, that works well if you're able to purchase a property within the same year and you want to continue being in real estate. That all works pretty well. However, that strategy is going to become less and less effective as bonus depreciation begins to phase down. And we're currently, as of this recording, bonus depreciation is 80% in 2023, but it's going to be dropping down to 60% in 2024, and then 20% thereafter till it's gone under current law in 2027. So there's kind of the drawback of that strategy, or how that's phasing out. Then there's always the installment sale, which can help spread out the capital gain over multiple years. That's another option some investors will use. However, you do typically have to pay the depreciation recapture tax from, if you did a cost segregation study on it or use bonus depreciation in that first year, which could be a sizable hit for some investors. Now, I was throwing one or two more. There's maybe more that we could go through, but sometimes people will no longer want to invest in real estate, or want the hassles of investing in like managing properties. So what they'll do is they'll use a 1031 exchange to trade into a Delaware statutory trust. Also, basically what that is like an IRS blessed vehicle that is like a syndication, more or less, that you don't have to be responsible for the day-to-day management of property anymore. So that's an option. There's another one called the 721 exchange that we've seen some clients use, and that's where you basically contribute property to a partnership. It's usually a REIT type of partnership, and in exchange for partnership interest, for an interest in the partnership, you defer your capital gains tax when you do that. And then as you sell off bits and pieces of the partnership interests, if you do that, then you start recognizing the gain. So that's the typical ways, and there's other ways, of course, but those are the ways that, like, kind of overarching we've seen. And the two most popular that I've seen, honestly, have been the lazy 1031 exchange over the last few years. That's probably been the most popular, to be honest.
Okay. Got it. Awesome, Thomas. A great overview. I want to touch on a couple of these because I don't get too often people that are practitioners like yourself, and I want to do the pros and cons on this. So let's do the pros and cons. I think this would be really, really beneficial for people. First of all, a traditional installment sale. This is what I see, Thomas, right? Especially for business sales, right? Like you've owned this business for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It's worth 5, 10, 15, 20, $30 million. First of all, traditional 453, you're capped at 5 million per person per year before there's an interest charge on whatever you're deferring, right? So if you're a married couple, you can get 10 million on a traditional installment sale. Then anything above that, you can still defer, but there's going to be an interest charge. All right. On the first 10 million, it's basically zero interest. But that's number one. But number two, the biggest challenge, Thomas, is everything is tied to that old buyer. All of that capital, especially if you did a huge seller carryback, is dependent on somebody who's probably not investment grade. You're not diversified. You're not liquid. You have the worst case is 2 or 3 years from now, they run the business into the ground. Now, all of a sudden, you're having to take the business back and pick up all the pieces, right? The very reason that you're selling it is probably for peace of mind that you don't want to own it or manage it anymore. Same thing can be said about the real estate, right? And so the traditional installment sale, I call it blockbuster installment sales, are just pretty restrictive, right? That's number one. Number two, what we offer is something called a deferred sales trust, which is actually an installment sale with a third-party trust, with the third-party trustee, that's us, but you don't have to be tied to that old asset. You're not financing the old buyer, you're financing the trust. And so what we're finding is this provides opportunities for people to invest into real estate, into other business ventures, into stocks, into liquid investments, or into syndications, or into funds. In other words, you can diversify the wealth. You're not tied to that old asset, right? You have your powder dry. I mean, the 2008 crash hit, and I remember the biggest frustration with that was people had overpaid for properties, had not diversified their wealth, and found themselves owing, if they sold too much tax, right? And part of because they'd overpaid for these 1031 exchanges too often. And so we learned about the deferred sales trust, and we said, wow, this, if properly structured, and if you understand how to make this thing an investment, not an expense, how to have the controls in place to be able to be an entrepreneur, you can unlock a lot of the freedoms that us as real estate investors wanted. So what are your thoughts on A, the traditional installment sale with businesses, like I just said, and then B, what are your thoughts on the deferred sales trust?
So the traditional installment sale, it is certainly limited. Like you said, there are certainly uses for it and places where it makes sense and where it doesn't make sense. And then as for the deferred sales trust, it's something that we have had some clients explore, and it's, if you and your advisors are all informed on how it works and you're able to operate it, it's certainly an option to consider. So I really don't have a strong opinion on it either way. It's just another tool in the tool belt for investors to particularly use if it works for them.
Excellent. So now what about the ability to, I don't know if you know this, but you can get a new depreciation schedule by partnering with the trust. So to me, what I love about buying investment real estate and doing the lazy 1031, Thomas, is you're getting a new depreciation schedule for that new property you bought. Your 1031 is not traveling with your old depreciation schedule, right? Or your old depreciation doesn't travel. So one of it, we call it tax flow, right? To maximize tax flow, you want to maximize depreciation with cost seg, with bonus depreciation, but also with the full fresh depreciation schedule. I have a client, his name's Harry, and I sold his apartment complex in Sacramento. And he has a second apartment complex that he's owned for over 30 years. And as you know, multifamily is 27 and a half years fully depreciated. I said, Harry, why don't you sell? He goes, Brett, I don't have anything to 1031 into. In full honesty, the profit's not accepted in his hometown. I'm still trying to convince him to use the deferred sales trust, but he's had this property for years. It was passed on from his dad, 40 plus years back before, and all this stuff. And I said, Harry, here's the problem. You have about $600,000 of income every year. You have no depreciation, so you're getting crushed with tax on that. I said, if you do a 1031 anyways, even if I found you the perfect deal, the biggest challenge becomes you're going to have to have an old depreciation schedule. And so I said, what about this? We sell the asset. We find a buyer for $10 million. We defer all of your capital gains tax into the deferred sales trust. You do an installment sale. You're married, so you can do a traditional installment sale with the DST. But then you can partner with the trust. So watch this, Thomas. He can form a brand new LLC and think of it kind of like a syndication or a partnership JV LLC. It's more like a JV LLC. And the trust can fund this LLC, but he's the managing member of the LLC. Okay. Yeah. And he can go buy real estate at any time with the fresh depreciation schedule.
Yeah.
Okay. And so he's got a promissory note for 10 million, typically at 6, 7, 8, 9%. And then he's joint venture partnered, and the part of the 10 million, all tax deferred, can go into this LLC, and he can go buy real estate, go buy businesses, go build real estate. So we've done this with Shea Pope. He sold a $3 million, basically about a couple $1 million business, and he started to develop a couple $1 million multifamily complex in Tennessee. We did it with a client who exited cryptocurrency. She bought crypto for about 50,000 and went to 50 million, and we exited 5 million of it, deferred the tax, and just use it for startup capital. So that concept, had you heard of that before? Does that change any thoughts on what the DST is and what it can do?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand how the DST works, and I think it can be a powerful solution if used properly and in the right context. Especially when it comes to real estate, you definitely want to get that. You definitely want to get the basis if you can. Like you said before, when you have the 1031 exchange, when you do a 1031, you're carrying forward, long story short, you're carrying forward the basis from the original property, plus or minus some items, and you're not getting that the full depreciable value of that new purchase, if you want to put it that way. So being able to have that full depreciation basis when it comes to real estate is certainly key. And like I said, the tool is definitely a powerful tool if it makes sense for the person and what they have going on.
Yeah, awesome. Now let's touch on the Delaware real fast, right? So with the Delaware, Thomas, I found that, and we do Delaware statutory trust for clients. We love it for mortgage over basis, right? Because debt over basis is not deferrable with installment sales. But for the mortgage over basis challenge, you can do these zero coupon deals where you essentially can get no debt in your name. It's non-recourse. It's a passive deal, so you have no more toilets, trash liability. But you have no control, no liquidity, no diversification. And these fees are huge. I got my series 22 and 63 at one point. Now we refer out our Delawares to the strategic alliance that we work with. But I mean, we get paid these big fees, but these deals are tied up for 7 to 10 years. A lot of times they're beautiful properties, but they're also not value add. It's like the whole Bigger Pockets community is like, how do you buy something, add value, and do forced equity appreciation? But these Delawares are turnkey deals with these amazing operators, but the returns aren't fantastic, and you have no control, no liquidity, no diversification. So I also call that the blockbuster Delaware 1031 is what I call it. But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, does any of that resonate, or what are some of the challenges you see with the Delaware?
Yeah, the Delaware is certainly a lot of people who we've seen explore that challenge, explore that strategy has certainly been the lack of control. That's because we have people who've been landlords their entire life or for a significant portion of their working career, and then when it gets to the point where they're ready to hand that off, they start to get cold feet about giving the reins over to somebody else. So that's been probably the biggest drawback for most people, and also perhaps the lack of options. In a sense, Delaware statutory trusts tend to have like Class A retail type of properties. There's other like office and things like that, but it's the lack of options and the lack of control is typically what we see the most objections around when it comes to using the DST as the Delaware statutory trust, to be specific, as an exit strategy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And if people want to learn how to eliminate the need for the 1031 exchange forever and the Delaware statutory trust, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about the deferred sales trust because I've seen the transformation it can do for clients, and especially for you, the real estate entrepreneur who's looking for options beyond the lack of control, lack of diversification, lack of liquidity. And the worst one, we think, Thomas, is the lack of timing. If you don't have time on your side to make investments when they make sense, then your investment plan is flawed, we believe, right? We believe if you have to stay in debt, especially debt that's been adjusting recently to overpay for properties in the 1031, your investment thesis and strategy is flawed. What you want to be able to do is to invest when it makes sense, and the deferred sales trust can offer that. So go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, and if anyone also wants to learn about that, you can check out the book, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. And my son wants me to help him out on his thing here. Hey, can you go see Mommy real fast? We're live. Go ahead. You're out of here. All right. So we're ready for the lightning round, Thomas?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget and make sure to tell yourself to do?
Go back to my 25-year-old self. One golden nugget. I would tell him to take the shot. Just take the risk and swing for the fences. You have plenty of time to recover. That's what I tell him.
Awesome. Question number 2, what's the number one book you recommend or gifted the most in the past year?
Number one book, 10X is Easier Than 2X by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy.
Amazing. Question number 3, what's the number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
The number one, okay, I don't know. I'm going to paraphrase this quote. It's going to be find someone to model, right? Master that model and then innovate after you've mastered the model. That's my, I don't know if that's like a paraphrase of a quote, but
I think it's perfect. Next question. What are you most curious about right now?
Right now, I'm most curious about basically how to educate and inspire people. That's really what I'm most exploring right now. Right now I'm running like an information type of business where we have courses, and it's just how do I inspire people to learn more and to basically take more more responsibility over their tax situation in general. That's probably the best. That's what I'm focused on right now.
That's awesome. Number one way you use ChatGPT for your business.
Oh yeah, that's great. Rewriting stuff, right? So I'm drafting things I've been writing for years, but sometimes you throw into ChatGPT, ask it to rewrite it or optimize it, and it rewrites it in a way that makes it much better than you had before. So it's still the same concept, still the same content, but it's just they rewrite it in a much cleaner way. So that's probably the primary usage that I've been using it, but I've also been using it to help me chunk logic and make calculations and analysis now, because now it has sophisticated analysis tools. So you could have it do like complex financial calculations for you in a matter of really seconds at the end of the day.
It's absolutely amazing. I'm still just trying to get my handle on just the basic stuff, but I absolutely love the ChatGPT. Thomas, last question. After all the people you've helped, create and preserve more wealth with taxes, become an expert CPA and certified financial planner, what would you say is the number one thing that you practice to stay centered in your values and stay encouraged to charge forward and reach even higher heights?
Yep. Daily journaling for sure. So I'm one of these people who has so much stuff floating around in my mind that I need to write it down and review it and clarify it. And doing the daily journal, which I typically do in the morning, just helps me stay focused and prioritize on what really needs to happen. So that's been a huge practice for me. And I do that every day.
Amazing. Thomas Castelli, I want to thank you so much for being on the show, sharing so much wisdom, going back and forth with me on the deferred sales trust and all the different tax strategies. I want to encourage you to keep using the gifts you've been given about being driven, doing things differently, having a heart for solving people's problems in a way that can help them unlock more wealth for themselves and for their families, for their communities. Keep seeing patterns and figure out ways to just help people, because to me, I believe we're on this big fight. It's the reverse Tea Party that's happening right now. And it's the battle for the wealth of America over the next 20 years, especially as the 84 trillion transfers. And if we don't have people on the front lines like yourself fighting every day to give people their options, the money, unfortunately, is probably going to be wasted away. Right. But if we can keep it in the hands of the entrepreneurs and the real estate investors and people who are creating jobs, creating communities, making an impact, we can make a huge difference for freedom in America. So I want to encourage you to keep doing that. For our listeners, Thomas, who want to get in touch with you, could you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, the best place to find me would be therealestatecpa.com/Thomas. That's where I have all my links and all my information. So that'd be the best place to find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions Podcast, also streaming on Expert CRE Secrets Podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust, a 1031 exchange, a Delaware statutory trust, cost seg, lazy 1031. These are all options that help you create and preserve more wealth, but not having a clear plan and a clear outcome in mind and a clear team to help you execute on this is the enemy. So you want to make sure you take action right now. You can get with Thomas by going to therealestatecpa.com, or you can get with myself by going to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We'd love the opportunity to help you out. So appreciate everyone out there. And also check out the book. We do have Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank in the book. We hit #1 bestseller. It's called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. So you can check that out. It's our focus, we believe, for unlocking your ideal wealth plan when selling any asset of any kind, cryptocurrency, businesses, real estate, saving a failed 1031 exchange. Also, check out the best 1031 exchange plan that we have to help you have a backup plan in case your 1031 fails. All that you can find at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Appreciate everybody, and we'll talk.